In today's conversation, I'm joined by abstract artist Abbie White, whose dreamy raw canvas paintings invite you to slow down, soften, and look a little longer. We talk about the beauty of working with fluid pigments, the magic that happens when an artist gives up a little control, and how Abbie's minimalist abstract works have found their way into galleries, prizes, art fairs, and collectors' homes across Australia. Abbie also shares what she's learned from art fairs, trusting her own voice and creating work that people recognize as unmistakably hers. If you love hearing about the behind the scenes journey of an artist, from finding her style, building her career, and creating work with honesty and heart, this is such a beautiful conversation to settle into. This is episode 118 of the Paint, Rest, Repeat podcast, which means you can find all the relevant links and the show notes over at permissiontopaint.co/podcast 118. Welcome to Paint, Rest, Repeat, the podcast for artists who are ready to ditch the overwhelm, follow their passion, and build a thriving art life on their own terms. I'm Rose, an Aussie artist, mum of two, and creative business coach who knows exactly how wild, wonderful, and wobbly the artist journey can be, because I've lived it. I left behind a safe teaching career to follow my heart into art, and now my work hangs in galleries and major art fairs across Australia. After years of coaching, I'm passionate about helping you ditch the starving artist myth, stick it to the naysayers, and design a creative life that truly lights you up. So if you're ready for real talk, practical tips, and heartfelt encouragement, you found your podcast. Hit follow and let's dive in. Our guest today is Abbie White, a Tasmanian-born, Brisbane-based abstract artist whose work feels like a cherished moment of quiet amongst our busy lives. Abbie says, "I paint how the world makes me feel, not so much how I see it." And that really captures the heart of her practice. Growing up in her mother's art studio, Abbie has been making and creating for most of her life. Now, through minimalist abstract paintings on raw canvas, she explores love, loss, and human connection, creating works that bring calm not only to herself, but to the homes they live in. Her work has been shown in galleries, prizes, and events across Australia, including the Art to Art Unearthed Art Prize, the Revival Art and Design Emerging Artist Prize, solo exhibitions, and the Brisbane Affordable Art Fair. I am so pleased to welcome Abbie White to the podcast. Abbie, it is so amazing to have you here. Thanks for making the time.
Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to get to know you more and learn more about your art and your journey as well. Do you want to take everyone through your art? Just explain, what does your art look like for the listeners here today?
So I'm an abstract painter. I paint on raw canvas. So most people will paint on gessoed canvas. I use raw canvas with acrylics mixed in a multitude of different ways, and it creates this sort of dreamy watercolor effect that you can't get when you use a gessoed canvas. So they have this sort of whimsy, semi-nostalgic, calm effect.
Honestly, your art is just gorgeous. I was just saying before off camera that I could stare into your artworks for just hours. There's something really beautiful about how, I guess, like watered down acrylics or watercolors, like liquefied sort of paints
Mm.
interact. Like they're just so mesmerizing.
Yeah, I think that when you work in that manner, you lose an element of control over it. So you have to give in into the process and you can't really think about it too much. There's obviously certain techniques and things that you need to know and learn, but I quite like that process of being able to just let the paint do its thing. And you have to work slowly, you have to sit with it, you have to be a little bit mindful. And, when life's pretty crazy and wild, that process for me, I've just leaned into that because it actually just works really well for me. And yeah, I enjoy it. It's like getting messy without actually kind of throwing paint around. You're just sort of sinking into it.
I love that. Have you always worked in this style? Because I feel like I've seen your work evolve from afar. I mean, we've only just met fairly recently in person, but I've seen your work evolve a little bit over the years. What has that evolution been? How did you start with your art? What was your art style when you started? And how has that traversed to where you are now with your art style?
Yeah. So when I was younger, I was obsessed with figures. I used to do a lot of life drawing. Then I kind of moved away from that, did some pastel stuff. That's what my mum was into. We're talking like teenagers, early 20s. And then I kind of stopped for a while with actual drawing and painting and sketchbook things and did some other, I don't know, things with my hands, right? Like painting walls in houses and all those other practical things. But when I came back to painting, it was a real outlet for me. And so I was literally throwing paint at a canvas. And I remember one day I'd had a really heavy meeting with a very important legal person and my brain was going to explode. So I literally got a beer and just threw paint at this canvas and I found it pretty cathartic. But it actually didn't serve me to paint like that. So over the years, I kind of realized that just kind of like built up this kind of, it's like you're rising with it. And I didn't want that. I wanted the feeling of sinking and like exhaling. While I was throwing paint around and adding to the canvas, I started to play with like watering down, different things and how to create glazes and layers. And I think that was sort of about the time that I probably got into my first gallery was when I started to use the glazes. And then, like you watch a lot of videos, you research, you're scrolling through the socials, all the things. And I saw people using raw canvas and I thought that looks pretty cool. I'll give that a go and tried a whole bunch of different ways of using it with more fluid acrylics and then with more structured acrylics. I was drawing on it, sketching on it using crayons and oil sticks and all sorts of things, like with no real outcome in mind. And eventually really just found that the flowing of the fluid, like the movement of the pigment and the water was what I really found worked for my brain more so than, what the end painting was going to be like. So a huge part of it for me is actually just that process and that's got to work for me. Yeah. And so now that's where I'm at. And I've got ideas about what I want to push into next, which will still be the same kind of thing, but using it maybe in a slightly different way. Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. It's just gorgeous. It's got that beautiful ethereal vibe. I often say whimsical. I don't think that's quite the right word. It's just this energy and just calm and peace to your work. I'm on your website, so abbiewhiteart.com, and I'm on the About Me page currently. So that's what I can see. I'm looking at that artwork particularly, which happens to be pink. So it's my favorite color, in case you didn't know, Abby. So I'm
Okay.
right in there. I'm loving that one.
Well, my mum used to love pink and I hated it. I refused to wear it as a teenager. Like I was ripped jeans and tie dyeing my own shirts and, going to the op shop from a very young age. And so the fact that I use pink now, my mum would be like so happy and so impressed. And I don't even know that I love pink, but it just keeps kind of appearing. So there's always this sort of like weird like tension in for myself when I start using pink, but it just keeps coming back and people like it.
We met recently at the Gather networking event in Brisbane. And yeah, you were sharing a little bit about why you paint or your personal benefits for painting. Do you want to share a little bit more again about that?
Yeah. So when I was 34, my mum passed away. Um, and then when I was 40, my dad passed away. So pretty close together. My mum was an artist, so I spent a lot of time in her studio when I was a kid. She did a visual arts diploma, I think, when I was in primary school. So after school, I would go and sit in the classes with her as well. Um, in the holidays, we would go to Melbourne because I'm from Launceston. So going to Melbourne was kind of what people did. So we spent a lot of time in art galleries. She was like this, art mentor for my whole life almost, which I didn't realize until, pretty recently how influential she'd been. And so when they both passed away, and my dad passed away during COVID, so I wasn't actually able to attend his funeral because it was in Tasmania. So pretty like epic thing to happen to somebody and a lot to work through. Part of that process for me to try and work out how to, deal with that was turning back to the painting, which I'd kind of set aside for a few years. And I went back into it. And that's where kind of this throwing around of paint and just kind of putting stuff out on the canvas really helped me to sort of one, process those feelings, but also just feel close to them again. And there was all of these natural things to do with color and style that I sort of had forgotten about that my mum had taught me. So it's like I had this whole little education that was kind of stuck in the back of my brain, and it was lovely to be able to kind of pull that out and yeah, feel close to her. And so now when I paint, even though that has sort of shifted and the way I paint, I still carry that through every painting, like that history and that relationship. And a lot of the paintings are about like connection and family and the people that we choose to spend time with and relationships and all that kind of stuff.
I can imagine painting in your particular style would force you to sort of slow down, to be present, to quieten the mind of the everyday, chaos, which is the rest of
Yeah.
life. And yeah, that I can see how you could make that connection with your family through that process. That's really special, Abby.
Yeah. I mean, I think the way that I paint now compared to what I would have painted, in my early 20s, had I've gone to visual art school, which I, decided not to. Um, it comes with like this whole other world of information and weight and, life experience that you don't realize affects everything that you do. I think at 20, if I had have been painting, um, in art school, it wouldn't have had the same substance. I was like a completely different person then. So yeah, it all kind of compiles into who you become.
Do you ever, have spend time fast forwarding and like speeding up into the future and thinking, I wonder what I'm going to be painting when I'm 60 or 70? Like what just blows my mind because if we're such different people now to who we were when we were 20, where are we going to be then?
Yeah, I don't know, actually. I probably haven't because certainly for the past, 2 years, I've spent most of the time just trying to, do a day by day mentality. And yeah, I have goals and things that I have to work towards, but there's been a lot going on in our lives. A couple of years ago, my son was really sick. And so the mentality was literally hour by hour. We were like, just trying to get through each hour. And then we went to like a day by day. And there's paintings that reflect that as well. So yeah, I think I just kind of kept that attitude that I'm like, I can't change what happens in the future. So I'm just going to take it one day at a time.
Funny how sometimes we need those experiences to remind us of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's your dynamic? So you've got a husband and you've got 2 boys, is that right?
Yeah. My eldest is 17 and my youngest is 14. They're both boys. And I have an 8-year-old dog who's a boy. So I'm surrounded by men.
I love that he's included. What's your dog's name?
Felix. Well, if we were going to have 3 children, which I was like, no, 2 is enough. But if we were going to have 3, his name would have been Felix if it was a boy. So then we're like, well, the dog should just be called Felix. Yeah. He's practically family. Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah, I did see on your socials actually, you did share, I think in the middle of last year. I'm not really a stalker, it was just preparation for the interview. That yeah, you were having trouble with one of the kiddos.
Yeah. It was a really interesting, I mean, it was awful. Like I wouldn't wish it on anybody, right? It's crap. But, um, and it was a year, like almost, a year of kind of lost time. But when I turned around and said to him later in the year, like, should I talk about this on my socials? And he just said, why wouldn't you? And I couldn't believe the maturity, and that attitude. I thought that he would want to kind of protect himself a bit more, but that was me wanting to protect him, not anybody else. And I think that the teenagers and the young people coming through now, they're not worried about what people think of them because of their mental health. They're all talking about it. And so why should I hold that stigma, in our generation of people? And interestingly, when I put that out there, the amount of people that messaged me who had said that they'd had people in the same situation or who reached out, to try and understand how we worked out, because he had OCD or he still has it, but it's managed. Yeah. And so people were trying to work out, how did we discover that this was a thing? Because he'd always had anxiety, but it just became like, yeah, a much bigger deal, and took over his life. So yeah, I'm glad I did it. You have to be cautious when you share something, that close because it's not all of me. It's literally one bit of me, but it just took over our lives for, you know, a good portion of that year. And I felt like if I didn't talk about it, I was kind of holding back from my collectors as well, because it was part of all of the paintings that came through.
Absolutely, and you'd feel like you're pretending. I really respect that about you. I don't definitely didn't see that, or I definitely don't see that as oversharing. And I think it takes bravery like that actually to help others. Because like you said, the response from that, from other people saying, "Oh yes, we've gone through similar," that would have really, what's the word, connected with people, but also just given them that courage to be honest as well about the things that they're going through. And yeah, definitely, that's such a big gap in this the approach to this with the generations. It's huge.
Yeah. Yeah. Even with OCD, people think it's like hand washing, and it just wasn't that at all. He just literally stopped eating because he thought he was being poisoned. That ability to kind of communicate that to people was pretty important, I think.
All right. Well, sorry you've gone through that and still navigating it, that yeah, that would have been really, really rough. And thankfully you had your art. How did that impact your art through that period?
It was a lot, yeah. So it peaked in December, like at Christmas time. The whole escalation of, you know, when it all fell apart for him was pretty much like 2 days before Christmas,
Mhm.
2024, I think that is. And so we kind of just were like holding him together for, a few months until you can get into the special help that you need. And so I was preparing for a solo in the February. And up until like 2 days before, I didn't even know if I could do it. Like, I didn't know if I could leave him alone, and I didn't know, how I was going to manage that. In the end, we did it. It was fine. Uh,
Mhm.
but you're kind of trying to separate these two worlds, and you're putting on your big girl pants and showing up. So that was a huge challenge, but we got through that. And then the art fair, my first art fair was only a couple of months after that as well. And so luckily, the people that I work with for the fair were amazing and really supportive, and we all knew each other pretty well. So that was okay. And I mean, I've been running businesses for almost 20 years. So I kind of am used to having some pressure and some things going wrong. And all of that is kind of, you learn to manage those things. But when it's a human and they've come from you, it does definitely change it. Yeah.
My goodness, of course. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But you kept together somehow. And your art itself though, did it change? Did you find your style evolved or took a slight little scenic route at that time?
Definitely the skies like became a big part of that. So the expanse and the weight of the world, like that sort of, there was a lot of Payne's grey and the dark kind of clouds hanging down. And it was also around the time of the cyclone as well. So we were managing the cyclone during, that as well in Brisbane. So all of these external kind of pressures and things, and that sky sort of started to feel like that was the weight of the world is kind of on your shoulders, but there's still like clarity and space and hope in the expanse of it.
It's almost like the world can throw all of this stuff at me, but I'm still standing, and I've got this and I'm safe despite all of this chaos and all this madness. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
You
right.
poor thing. That sounds really challenging.
Look, it's life, right? It's life. And there's lots of stories and lots of crazy things that have happened in my time, but like one foot in front of the other, just it all adds to who you are, right? Yeah.
And you mentioned then fairs because you just wrapped up was it your second fair then? Did that just happen? Yes. Okay. So you just wrapped up your second fair. So you've had two fair experiences, both the affordable art fair, both Brisbane. What's your consensus? Worth doing? Hard? Easy? Amazing? What's your story with the fairs generally?
It's all the things, everything. Like you throw a word out there and it's probably in there. It's a lot. I was really grateful for the opportunity. The Brisbane Art Co that I'm with is a collective that was put together 3 years ago. And the second year, one of the members had a residency in Italy. So Kerry Rushton, she went to Italy, did this residency, and they needed another member because you have to have three to be a collective. And so my gorgeous friend, Crystal Bradford, was telling me about it. And I was like, hello, pick me, pick me. And so they, obviously all talked about it and had to do whatever they did in the background. And then they invited me to join them for the second year. It was, you're going in with your eyes wide open, but no idea what to expect. And I knew that I had work that I could sell. I didn't have a collection as such, but with the art fair, most of what you're seeing on the walls is kind of a collection of all different artists anyway. So it's not like when you do a show in a gallery and it has to be like this cohesive body of work. So I felt like I could just kind of pull whatever I had, and I painted a few extra pieces, I think, for it. And showed up all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed with no idea what was going to happen. And I think the first day you are bumping in and you spend, 6 hours like carrying paintings across a road, and your feet are aching and you're sweating and it's just like so hard, and you haven't even hung anything on the walls. I'm thinking, what have I got myself in for? This is wild. But you just have to keep pushing because, it's such time constraints. So, hung the work. I didn't hang it how I wanted to probably, but, it looked fine. The first day I didn't sell anything on my first fair. The second day, I think I didn't sell anything till about 4 o'clock. So I was like, what have I done? This is a lot of money, and, what's happening? And then it was off. Then I pretty much sold everything. Like on that next, I think it was the Saturday and the Sunday, was struggling to put work back on the walls. So it is a really expensive thing to do. So you have to be prepared to show up and not make any money, because sometimes people don't sell. You might sell incredible the first year. My second year wasn't as successful. I sold some work, and I was in some other galleries as well at the fair, so I sold through them. But I certainly wasn't as successful as the first year in terms of sales. But
Mm.
in saying that, my attitude towards it is always kind of like, you put the money on the table and it's the biggest marketing expense you'll ever have. And what you get back from that is these beautiful conversations with people who are there to buy art or look at art or consider putting art in their home. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but we've had people come through 6 to 12 months later who have seen your work at the fair and they've been thinking about it. They've finished their renovation, or, they're ready to buy, they've got some money, whatever's happened, and they decide to pull the trigger. So you're planting all these seeds. You're getting direct feedback about the work as well, what people like, what they don't like, what sizes they like. And so you have to be on and you have to be paying attention to all of that stuff. And if you're only focused on the money and trying to sell the work, you're missing all of those great things. So I learned, like both years were slightly different, and I probably approached the work slightly differently. But then the market changed as well. Like this year, there was a huge shift in what people could afford. And we noticed the younger buyers weren't there. There's a whole bunch of factors that go into it. And I think, if you're thinking about doing it, you just need to really consider who you are doing it with as well. Like the team and the people that you're involved with can really make or break the event. And we've seen people who've, not had a good time because they're having conflict with other artists or other people in their booth, or they feel like the gallery is taking too much control of their work and they've got no control over it. But when you go with a gallery, they're paying, so you kind of have to accept that whatever happens is going to happen. Our collective works very fairly in that we split all the costs. We split the wall space evenly. We discuss everything. We draw straws for what walls we're going to have, all of that kind of stuff. And then it's not to say we can't be flexible later on, because certainly there's always room for that. But we're all rooting for each other, and when someone sells something, there's high fives and hugs, and it doesn't matter how big or small it is. It's all celebrated because we all want each other to be successful, because we want to keep doing it. And then that energy, follows through into the people that come into the stand, and they can feel that, they can feel that there's a nice energy and a good group of people.
Definitely. You've got to focus on making it an enjoyable experience, number one. And because you can't control when someone's going to buy something, right? You can't control that. You can set everything up as best as you possibly can, send out your pre-email marketing, your social media, all of that jazz. But you can't force someone to make a purchase. So you've got to, I love that you're sharing that you've got to focus on those other things as well, those connections, the long game, probably the email list. You would have had a collector's list going as well. Conversation, the feedback on your work, because I think it's hard when you just if you don't have those face-to-face experiences and you're just sharing your work online, you don't, or even through galleries, you don't get that feedback, and so you're sort of operating in a bubble. So it's quite I get that. That's an important piece of the fair perks, I think.
Yeah, the first year I had so many, I mean, both years really, but the first year I cried every day. And it wasn't because it was bad. It was stories that we were sharing, like people would, they would come and see the work and they'd be looking at it and they'd be like, oh, I see the ocean in this. And I'd say, oh yeah, well, do you want me to tell you, what it's about? And so we would start talking and then the next minute they're in tears and I'm like, oh no, is it something I've said? And there's one particular lady, her husband was really sick and they had got engaged on an island, that the water was based on. And so she had all this connection and then I'm crying and then we're crying. And then she's like, I need to take this painting home because, it's just like, this is meant to be. And I had, like, yeah, 4 or 5 experiences like that in the first fair where people were just so connected to the work and to the stories, and you would never get that in a gallery. Like I've never experienced anything like that before, and so I hold on to that. I really leaned into the stories and really try to talk about the work, what's behind the work. Yeah. And now this year, I actually wrote some of those stories on the back of the paintings and actually stapled them to the back so that people have those to take home with them as well.
I love that touch. I haven't seen that. I don't think I've seen your work in person yet, have I? Maybe
You
that's
have to
why.
come back to Brisbane and visit.
Yeah. Well, we will have another event at some point. I'm looking on your website. I'm seeing a lot of out of stock things on your website. Stop selling, Abby. Stop selling like hotcakes.
I like to leave the out of stocks there because it makes it seem like, it's hard to get. Yeah. After a while, I'll take them off.
So, oh my gosh, they're just so beautiful. Okay, sorry, I'm just shopping. Everybody, listen to the podcast where Roz goes shopping. Anyway, great idea. All right, I'm looking at my notes. So we've talked about your art. We've talked about, a lot of the challenges on the way, why you create, the emotional connection to your process, and we've talked about the fairs as well. So just sort of backtracking a little bit, if we go back to when you first started to take your art seriously. I really actually don't like that expression, but I mean, when you first decided to become a professional artist, I know you say that you hold your dreams and goals lightly, but in that light sense, what was the direction that you were wanting to go at that point? And what were you chasing?
I think I don't entirely remember exactly what happened, but I remember painting and my friend who's not an artist was like, these are good. You need to show people. And, imposter syndrome is like in all of us. And then I thought, well, why not? I'll just put it into something and see what happens. And Aspire Gallery, who in Brisbane here, who supports a lot of early career artists, they have a call out for a little feature wall, I think it is, which is free. So there's no risk. There's just, the risk to your ego. But I thought, well, I'll put something in and if it gets rejected, then that's still information, right? Whatever that means, it's still some kind of information. So I put in and I got accepted. I think 2 pieces got accepted. And then they were in the show and I remembered like drinking champagne at 10 a.m. in the morning because I was so excited to be in a gallery. And my friend was like, see, you can call yourself an artist now because you're in a gallery. And I was like, yeah, you're probably right. And it took a little while to kind of switch that because I've always been, known for other business things, not really for my art. So, now I kind of do all the things and they're kind of equal. But yeah, there was a bit of a shift that happened there. And then, the show went for like a month, I think. And then on the last day, one of the paintings sold. And I thought, that's great. So I just kept submitting. And some things you have to pay for and some things you don't. And I thought, I'm producing work. I'll just keep submitting and see what happens. And I think for almost a year, like everything sold. And I thought, I must be onto something here because, they keep selling the work. Not like every show something would sell, not all the pieces, but something would sell. And then I spent time going into the gallery and talking to Irene and sort of asking questions about how to improve, not improve the work, that's not the right word, but, just talking about details like framing and stretching and, certificates and what other artists were doing and what she thought collectors wanted. And I think it's not like gospel, right? That's just her opinion and her gallery. But the more you talk to other artists and other galleries and other people, the more information you get, and you can kind of decide who you want to be from that and what parts of that you want to take on. Because there's definitely things that I don't think are important for my work, but there's certain things that I wouldn't not do now. They're must haves. Yeah, and then I can't remember what I did from Aspire. I think I just started entering other prizes because I thought, what have I got to lose? Like, why not? And I kept getting accepted. I didn't have a lot of rejection in the first maybe 18 months to 2 years of my career. I got into a lot of stuff. So, and I remember thinking at some point, this is going to stop. I can't keep being like hot. There's going to be some rejection at some point. So I was ready for it when it happened. But, now I think if I don't get into something, I don't get into it. And I just accept that actually it's probably not the right time or the right piece, or that's just one person's opinion.
And I guess the rest of life has helped you to keep that in perspective as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just a painting.
You have been in a zillion exhibitions and, yeah, your art prizes as well. I'm on your website. So you've been a finalist in the Aspire, in multiple Aspire competitions, then the Toowoomba Gallery Revival Art and Design a few times, Art to Art as well, and then the Rotary Art Prize. You're doing great. This is fantastic.
Yeah, I think it's important to reflect on those things, because it's easy to feel like I haven't done it that much in the last year. But then I talk to people
Mm.
and they're like, no, you look like you're doing all of these things. And I often say, well, that's marketing, partly.
No, but it's also fact.
It is, yeah. Um, And I think like things started pretty fast in the beginning. I had a lot of success and I knew that that wasn't going to stay there. But I always positioned myself because of my business background. I kind of positioned myself so that I could grow with that. And now, while I don't have goals as such, I do have some goals, and that is to keep painting for a long time. So I'm not scattering myself across all of the galleries and everyone who, puts their hand up or has an open call. I don't want to be visible everywhere and in every gallery. I actually am now saying, well, what do I want and who do I want to be as an artist, and what galleries do I want to work with, and trying to kind of not target, but, like focus on what's the next step for me.
In that area of the art prizes and competitions, what would your words of wisdom be to anyone listening who's wanting to enter but feeling nervous to, or maybe they have entered and they've had a few rejections come back? What would you suggest to artists like that if you can, go back in time and imagine you in that starting out sort of period?
Look, I still get rejected now, so it's not even I think I've entered jumbled 3 times and I've been rejected every time, but it doesn't mean I'm a bad artist. It just means that the work that I'm doing right now doesn't fit with what they want in their store. So, I'm not gonna stop doing it because it's free. So, if it's free, you've got nothing to lose by putting yourself out there and, entering something. So I think Jumbled's free, Art to Art is free. And I really didn't expect to get into that. That's was a quite a big one for me to get. Yeah. I think if you've got your own authentic voice and you're painting from your heart, it hurts to get rejected, but there's no better way to keep moving forwards than getting rejected. So
Mm.
you kind of need that to be able to keep progressing and learning and choose the prizes that are appropriate for where you're at. Because I know I've entered some and I'm like, wow, that was a stretch. I mean, you never know. Yeah, I think you got to look at the judges, look at the gallery. Do they actually have work like yours? Are the artists, doing similar work or at that level? Some of the galleries are or the prizes are very like art school focused, and I haven't got that qualification. So I'm aware of that, it would be very hard for me to win a prize at like Lethbridge because I don't have that technical, skill. Yes, I grew up painting and doing all the things, but I don't have it on my CV. It's not impossible, I guess, but like I probably wouldn't enter those ones because I just don't think that's, a good fit. Also, my work probably doesn't fit with Lethbridge anyway. So, do you know what I mean? It's just like reading the market, do your research.
Yeah, definitely. And asking around as well, I think, is quite good and getting other people's opinions, like choosing the right people to ask, but other people's opinions on does my art fit this particular gallery or this particular, panel? Would it work there or not, sort of thing.
Yeah. And don't ask the gallery because they're going to say, sure, enter it. I'll take your $50. And I'm not saying they shouldn't get something. Sure. That's a different conversation perhaps, but talk to other people who have entered, look at who's been a finalist before and see what they've done, like go and do a deep dive on their CV. Where did they start? Some people don't have all of it on their CV. I know some people take some things off. I probably have as well, because otherwise the list is too long. Um, yeah, if you start to kind of look at, who else has been a finalist and what their history is, and then who the judges are as well. If it's not just the gallery, if there's a bunch of other judges, what kind of work do they like? Yeah, that will help you to narrow down perhaps what the best option is.
I've got a couple of extra little questions for you before we wrap up. So, the next question really is around if you had a couple of like really powerful tips for people who are listening today, what would they be? But in the context of, what has helped you on your journey?
I think the number one thing right now, because if you ask me tomorrow, it might change, but right now, it would be to look in, not out. Because I think it's very easy now for us all to focus on what everyone else is doing and compare ourselves and look at social media and how does someone do that? What technique is that? Yes, there's value in learning, but there's actually real learning in the doing. And when you start, looking into your own thoughts and feelings and processing that into art, that's where the real magic happens. And you might make some really shit art, but you kind of have to do that as well. It's like finding the magic in the play. Yeah, I think we spend too much time looking at what everyone else is doing and worrying about that. Yeah. And then people can feel it as well, right? Because then you're not authentic to who you are. And we all want the work to feel like our own, really. Like I was randomly in a magazine this month and someone messaged me from Tasmania that I used to know, and they said, "Oh, I saw this painting in the magazine and I knew that it was yours." And I thought, how amazing is that? Like they didn't know I was going to be in it, but they saw it and were like, that must be Abbie. And then they looked and found the name and it was. So, that's like, that was really special because I thought at least I'm onto something that people can recognize who I am and the way that I work.
Hmm.
I'm not getting lost in the mix of all of the other things. And it takes a long time to do that. So that's tip number two is that you can't rush things. You have to you have to just do the work, play, make a lot of bad art. And, somewhere in there, there'll be some gems and some magic. Then you try to recreate that thing and try to do it again. There's a good reel of me doing it, having a tantrum where I see this amazing, like big swoosh of paint and I look up and it's flicked over this painting and I do this big like tantrum, but the painting still exists and I just turned it into something else because it's like, how do you shift, what you wanted something to be or what you thought it should be and just roll with it. It's like life, right? You just got to kind of roll with it. Sometimes it doesn't work like that, but I'm like, I'm going to try and make this work, as annoyed as I was for like 10 seconds.
Yes, 100%. Because when did the last thing you tried to do actually go to plan? Nothing ever goes perfectly to plan.
There's no mistakes. That's sort of my
No.
attitude. Like, you know what? It might not make it to a canvas that's going to sit on someone's wall, but in that mistake, there's learning, if you want to
Yes.
call it a
Yeah.
mistake. And by being bad art, it's still learning something.
Happy accidents, right? Isn't that what Bob Ross used to say?
Yeah. And there's that great kids, A Beautiful Oops, is it? That kids
Yeah.
book where they can paint from the splotches. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's another great series for kids. Have you heard of the Peter Reynolds books? It's the Dot and Ish. There's one called Ish, and there's another one called Sky Color, and they're great if you got little kiddos. Yeah, really, really good. And if you find them, Abby, your kids are older, but if you find them in a bookstore, have a read. You'll love them too.
I used to spend a lot of time looking at kids' books because I liked the pictures. Even as a teenager, I used to collect them. So I
Yeah.
haven't done that for a long time, so maybe I should.
Maybe that's what you'll be doing at 60, 70. Illustrations for books.
Maybe. I did illustrate a book with my mum when I was a teenager. So
There you go.
I keep meaning to try and find it. It had a mushroom on the front.
I was going to say, I want to see this. When you find it, send me a picture.
Yeah, hopefully it's not eaten by a silverfish or anything, but it's
Yeah.
there somewhere.
All right. Well, we got 2 tips in there. I really like that. And, some of the things that have helped you on your journey. For our listeners, if they'd like to go and check out your art, and also, get in touch with you if they want to ask you any questions or inquire about any of your artworks, how are they best to do that?
You can contact me on Instagram at Abbie_White_art. My name's Abbie, or on my website, abbiewhiteart.com. I'm pretty sure there's a link in there for email. Yeah, email, DM. That's probably the best way.
And the closing question, if you could go back in time to little you and give yourself some advice, words of wisdom, just something, what would it be?
I often think about it because when I was at school, I didn't do visual arts. I did a performing arts degree instead. And it was because my art teacher gave me a bad mark on my final assessment. And he's now a very big gallery owner in Sydney. But I made that choice based on one person's opinion. And so I think I would probably say to myself, don't listen to anybody, just go with your gut, follow your heart. But the other side of that is that had I done visual arts when I was 20, as whimsy me, I probably wouldn't have been painting, with all of these experiences. So, yeah.
All right, Abby, catch you soon.
Yeah, nice to talk to you. Thanks for having me.
You too. All right, catch you soon. Bye.
Bye.
Before you go, if you're an artist in Australia and you're craving more real life creative connection, I'd love to invite you to join us at Gather. Gather is a series of in person events for artists across Australia, a chance to step away from the screen, meet other artists, have beautiful conversations, and feel part of a supportive creative community. You can find upcoming Gather events and register through the link in the show notes. I'd love to see you there.